Welcome back to Ritual Hobby and Art. Today I'm out doing some plein air in my backyard. Got my portable desk set up at my fire pit and I'm just getting right into it. This is a scene from behind the house. Here's a picture of that scene. And so a lot of artists will put down water on the surface of the paper. If that was watercolor paper, that certainly would work. This is a mixed media paper, and I hesitate to put a lot of water down. It will curl. You see the clips there. So I've just gone ahead and mixed up some cerulean blue paint. I'm working with gouache, and so I've mixed up some cerulean blue and just put it right down on the paper. And so I'm blending that in, and at some point here we'll get a brush out to do some clouds. Get some clouds in there using the characteristics of gouache being fully water-based. I'm actually going to use a wet brush to kind of work in those clouds rather than using white gouache paint. This is a much more, to me, easier way of doing that. Some people use tissue or paper towel to do this as well, but for this spring day, I think I'll just do this. I'm mixing up some green paint. I'm going to start adding the trees in the background. This is trees that probably are on the street behind us with buildings in front of it, which I'll get to at some point. Right now I'm just establishing their existence, so nothing really that defined. I am ending at that spot right there because that's where the building is going to go, the house that's directly behind us. And so working that into the picture. Add some darker tone into the paint, a little darker than I had before. It gives a little more definition to the trees. Difference between the trees that are a little closer and the ones that are further behind. So at this point, I'm starting to mix up some reds and start making the brick building behind us. This is a brick house, probably about 2 stories, and I'm starting to get the colors in. I'll add windows and some other features, but remember, if you remember from the first picture, this is behind, there's like 3 or 4 trees that block it. And so any real detail is going to be lost with the trees and whatever else is in the foreground. Using this trick of getting a little more paint on the picture by putting a bunch of it on the left here, and I'm going to add some water to it and wash it to the right. So I've got my basic there, and just spread it over a little more. This part of the back is going to be slightly darker because it's in the shade, and that side piece has got the sun on it. Hard to tell right now because it's shady and cloudy, but later on that sun will come out and really bring some light to this. I've mixed up some dominant colors, mainly red, green, and blue, to make a sort of gray, and that's what I'm using for the roof. Squeezing the brush with my 2 fingers to make it thinner and a little easier to control for moving the paint around for this roof. I've added another house to the right there, a little further back, and now I'm starting to work on the grass. The grass just directly in front of the center house, and this will be added to with grass that comes where the trees are and then more into the foreground. As is often the case when doing plein air, I seem to have attracted an onlooker. There's a fence to the left for another property behind us. So I'm starting to make the picket fence for that. It's sort of a brown picket fence that runs along the side and then up sort of a small hill, and that small hill part is going to be hard to do, so I'm really focusing on what's on the back. I tend to turn my paper to the side to do things like drawing horizontal lines, especially for things like the fence, the runner, the spline that goes through the fence. It's a good way to. This is why I don't do well with easels and that sort of thing. I like to be able to turn my work around. Adding some bushes and small trees that are around the properties, a little closer than those trees in the background. Off camera, I have gone ahead and made the trunks for the 4 prominent maple trees that are in the sort of center ground of this picture. So now I'm going to start adding the leaves. I'm doing it first with a sort of a filbert brush, but here in a minute I'm going to get out a brush specifically for making tree leaves. This is a Matthew Palmer tree and texture brush, small size. I went ahead and bought all 3. They're small, medium, and large. These brushes are very good because they're splayed out such that they can apply many pieces of paint, especially good for making the leaves and foliage of trees. And I have not been able to find any other brush in the US that can do this other than taking an old brush and just kind of mangling it. If you have any ideas of a better place to get one, let me know in the comments. But for now, I will use what Matthew Palmer has created and use that. It works for both watercolor and gouache, and I do occasionally use it for acrylic as well. Just make sure I clean it off when I'm finished. So I've started to put down the shadowing for these trees here in the front, which pretty much covers the ground. I always have trouble with this. I'm trying to make them look, a darker color of whatever the ground color is. If that's a green, then I make it a darker green. If it's brown, a darker brown, and so on. Snow is especially difficult. I usually make that gray. Now, as I put the color down, I start with a sort of a lighter medium color, and then I darken that up over time. But I get down to this point here where, gosh, it looks kind of like ivy on the ground and not so much shadow. So this is something I have to continually work on, but every painting is a practice for me, and so that's how I do it. So at this point, to sort of cover up what's happened, I'm putting water into this dark green paint to give it a little more thin appearance, like a shadow would be, give it some holes, as you would have some where the leaves and the branches would allow sun to pass through to the ground. That's what I'm trying to do. And so, it's a little bit as you go along. So I have added some white to the building to make windows, and now I'm working on the trees, adding some white gray material to give some light, some highlight to those trunks.